Jac Caglianone was officially assigned to the minor leagues this morning. When's the next time we're going to see him? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also find us on however you listen to your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know how this podcast works, we bring you 5 episodes a week. We talk strictly Royals baseball, unless something outside of Kansas City directly impacts the Royals. And on Fridays, it's dedicated to you, the listener, where you send in questions to me, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitter, and we get to every single one. If you want an example episode, you can just go back to our channel and find the Mailbag Friday episode, any one of them, and you can see how it works. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I know this is going to upset a lot of people out there considering how spring training has gone for the Royals, which has been the Jac Caglianone show, not just in Kansas City, but perhaps all of baseball, with the way that he hit .529, had multiple home runs that traveled over 440 feet, north of 110 miles per hour on the exit velocity. He blossomed, at least in spring training, into a star. And it got every Royals fan thinking, including myself, just when are we going to see him? Is spring training enough to put a guy on the radar for the first half of the season? Not every prospect. There's some guys that go down to surprise Arizona and hit 330, 380, and they're on your radar. But if you were asked to give an honest answer, you would say, maybe we see them during the September call-ups. And truthfully, that's where I was at with Jac Caglianone when I showed up to surprise about a month ago. When we were down there and you saw him in camp before the games had started, you knew there was some buzz around him and you knew there was that star status. But no games had happened just yet, and you can only take certain coaches and certain players' words for what they are. I mean, they're going to pump up a big-time prospect, and they're always going to talk highly about a prospect. That's the way things go in baseball. And it wasn't to single out anybody I talked to and asking about Jac Caglianone. You go to any camp in baseball and you tell them to give an evaluation of last year's first-round pick, every single team is going to say somewhat of the same thing, that this guy's going to be a star, he's impressing, he's opening a lot of eyes. And even with Jac Caglianone, the batting practice was so impressive. How big he was something that caught you off guard. And yet he goes into the games and he starts showing that this level is doable for him, even if it is just spring training. I mean, he's facing AA guys, he's facing AAA guys, saw a couple of big leaguers, but how much or how many of those big leaguers were truly working on, getting everybody out they were facing? Sometimes you face a big league guy and they're throwing the same pitch 5 or 6 times in a row, or they've been working on something and they want to toy with it in a spring training start. Still, 529 is 529. It could not have gone better for Jac Caglianone in spring training this year. You wanted to see him pop in his first big league camp. He did more than that. He was by far and away the most impressive hitter in camp, and he would go viral a couple of times. We know about the power. We know about his abilities coming out of Florida. What was impressive to me was that his plate coverage, his plate discipline was very polished. And I'm not going to go back on the words that I said weeks ago. I continue to circle back to this. And it's that Jac Caglianone had to give 100, 110% each and every time he was out there, because he wasn't going to start multiple games down there in Surprise. He would come in for the second half of a game. He might start in a split squad, but there were going to be limited opportunities for him. He's trying his absolute best, and that's all he could have done. And him trying his absolute best, maybe against guys that are also trying 100%, 110%, he dominated them. Even against big leaguers who might have been going at 75, 80%, he dominated them. No matter who he went up against, he did not look overmatched. And there were a couple of times that he fell behind 0-2, and you would think for a young hitter, especially a power hitter, this is the time where he has the ugly swing. He's overmatched a bit. He's overzealous. He's too aggressive, and you just didn't see that down in Surprise. And that's what moved up my timeline for him from around maybe September, early 2026 to maybe this summer. And it all started for me when we read that article that Jeff Passan had wrote about guys that were popping in camp and what scouts were saying. And Jac Caglianone was one of 10 players mentioned in this article that scouts were buzzing about. And in this piece, he writes that, maybe the timeline could be as early as this summer if all goes well for him. And we all knew how much had to go well for him. He has to hit incredibly well. The power has to be there. The swing and miss has to be down. And he's going to have to learn how to play one of the outfield spots. And the Royals knew this, and they're not going to rush him. Let me be very clear on that. They are not going to rush him if he's hitting 320 in the first month of the season. If he's hitting 450, they might be able to elevate him to AAA as early as May. But this was always going to be expected. He was going to be assigned to the minor leagues, which is what happened this morning. And yes, it's going to upset some people. You wanted to see him there on opening day. There's just no rush right now. The Royals can take their time with Jac Caglianone, and even if that means we don't see him till July or August, so be it. That is still an incredibly fast timeline for a guy that was drafted last summer. When you have somebody like that who can fast-track his way to the big league in his first full professional season, you have an extraordinary talent. And there's just some things that'll need to be cleaned up down there. If he goes down and struggles to begin the minor league season, it doesn't mean that you have to push it back to 2026. We just have to be open to a couple of possibilities here. The first one, the best case scenario, would be that he does what Wyatt Langford does. You've heard us talk about him before, the big-time prospect for the Texas Rangers, who also came out of Florida. He goes down to AA, he tears it up, moves up to AAA quickly, tears it up. You got him in the big leagues by June. That, to me, would be the best-case scenario. It's a long shot because Wyatt Langford, his was a bit different where he got drafted, tore it up in AA and AAA in the first half of his professional season. And then on opening day of last year, he was debuting. Or he was making his debut. I believe it was March 28th. That was a little bit different. Jac Caglianone didn't tear it up when he went to play for Quad Cities last year. There was a bit of a learning curve. We knew the talent and the tools were there, but they were fully on display in big league camp. And that was the best thing to see. You wanted to see him have a camp like that where now in your mind you go, he could do that to AA pitching. And he very well may do that to AAA pitching. And if that happens, he's also going to be learning an outfield spot. And I got this question yesterday. I want to fully address it. Why doesn't Jac Caglianone start the season playing right field? If that's going to be where he plays in Kansas City, assuming he gets up this year, why is he not going to learn that position now? And I believe my opinion is what the Royals might be thinking as well. It's not to pump myself up here, but when we were down in Surprise and we talked with JJ Piccolo, he had said he's going to play first base. And the reason you want to do that is you put him at first base, you worry about your offensive approach first, because that is his best attribute. If he goes down there playing first base and he's hitting 450, now you can make that transition. Because why? It's easier to learn a corner outfield spot when you're not worried about what you're doing at the plate. If you put him out there in right field and he's trying to get off to a hot start, well, what becomes the focal point? Likely learning the corner outfield spot. Every single day putting a lot of effort into learning right field. The Royals are just going to be looking for him to be playable in right field. He doesn't need to be a Gold Glover. If he can hit that well in AA and AAA, and then you put him out there in right field, and he can run down the routine fly balls, he's got a great arm already. We know that's there. you could find a spot for him in Kansas City. You put him up there in right field on March 28th or early April at the minor league season, and he's struggling in right and it's carrying over to the plate. That's somebody you're not going to be able to play in Kansas City. The first goal here is to get the confidence and the offense completely polished, where we know that's a big league caliber hitter. You also just don't want to pigeonhole him into a DH role in Kansas City. He may DH a lot, and maybe when he gets called up, he plays first base a lot, and Vinny's the one that DHs. But if you worry about the offense first, you get that all situated, you get that nailed down. Now you can make that shift to playing right field twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And I don't believe it'll be he's now a full-time right fielder, because I got asked this same question. What's his long-term position? I still believe it's first base. He'll have that ability to play first and the outfield. I would just venture a guess, though, that long-term, he would be the first baseman. He gives me more long-term first baseman than Vinny does. And not that Vinny's not going to be on the roster, and Vinny would still play first base from time to time. I would just see him transitioning into more of a DH role. However, Jac Caglianone having that ability to play the outfield is beneficial to the lineup, because it doesn't put Vinny into a full-time DH role. He can also play first base, and you could put Caglianone out there in right field. So now we're going to see what he's going to be able to do, likely down in Double-A. He may not be down there very long. And what that timeline looks like for me, I would say summertime, because I do expect him to go down there and hit very well to begin the year. He hits like the best of anybody down in Double-A. Maybe you could see him in early June. I would still say maybe around the deadline and maybe August. However, that's going to be an ongoing thing. That could be changing from week to week with Jac Caglianone. I just know for a fact the Royals are not going to rush him. They are not going to put him on that big league roster in May if he's not completely ready. They want to be sure that when he's coming up, he's not just going to be a spare part. He's going to be one of the bigger contributors in that lineup. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, Cole Ragans was officially named the opening day starter for the second year in a row. How cool is that for him? And what can we make about this rotation going into the year? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more today. Again, that is wonderfulpistachios.com to go and learn more today. Also want to let you know about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for half off your first year. Go get started today at Monarch Money. We got the word yesterday that Cole Ragans was officially named the opening day starter for the Royals for the second year in the row. Next week, think about that. Royals baseball, regular season baseball, I should say, is 10 days away. So we're getting closer and closer to seeing the boys in blue walk out there or run out there on the field at Kauffman Stadium, and Cole Ragans will be that first Royals pitcher to climb the bump. It's no surprise whatsoever. It was never going to be another option, in my opinion. If he was healthy, he's going to be the opening day starter. And I would venture a guess that next year, assuming he's still healthy, he will be the opening day starter as well. It's no disrespect to Seth Lugo or Micah Wacha. I mean, Seth Lugo was a Cy Young finalist. He's just not this team's ace. He will pitch on that Saturday afternoon game for game 2 of the 2025 season. Then Micah Wacha will get the ball on Sunday. Again, it has not been officially reported who the number 2 and number 3 starter will be. That's just my hunch. And then when the Royals head off to Milwaukee for their first road series of the year, I would say Michael Lorenzen would get the ball in that first game, and then Chris Bubich. Though, if they wanted to maybe skip that first start, they have the ability to do so because the Royals have the off day on Friday where you could go Ragans, Lugo, Wacha, Lorenzen for that Monday game in Milwaukee at 1:10, and the Tuesday game, which is the first night road game of the year, you could go back to Cole Ragans because you did have that off day and he would be due to pitch. They have that ability to do so, and maybe they would. It might come down to how that first game goes, right? If the Royals are in a situation where they desperately need somebody to stop the bleeding, like let's say in a worst case scenario, the Royals lose their first 4 games of the year, I would say that Cole Ragans would get the ball on that second road game in Milwaukee. And then right after that Milwaukee series, they will be hosting the Baltimore Orioles for a weekend series. It's a tough schedule. We did a segment on that a few weeks ago where that April schedule sees a lot of playoff teams from a year ago. You get Cleveland, division winner. You get Milwaukee, division winner. Baltimore, a team that was in the wild card. Minnesota wasn't a playoff team, but was right in it into the final week of the season. They then see Cleveland again on April 11th, 12th, and 13th. They will see the Yankees in New York on April 14th, 15th, and 16th. They'll see Detroit right after that. They do get a break with the Rockies toward the end of April, and then they ramp things back up with the Astros for the final weekend series in April the 25th, 26th, and 27th. And then you'd have a little bit of a step back again with Tampa Bay before you enter May. Lots of playoff teams that you will be facing, and that's just what I'm going back to here, where the Royals will have a couple of off days in April. In fact, back-to-back Mondays on the 21st and 28th, where you might see them skip that start for Chris Bubich or Daniel Lynch. It's not going to be Alec Marsh, in my opinion, because of this slow start. There's 10 days to go, and we still haven't seen him with an extended look yet. He's more so building up that arm at this point in time, making sure he's all good to go. Then I would say he's going to go down to Omaha, keep that arm fresh, keep that arm loose, where the Royals can call upon him if they need him early on in the season. That's what I got, though. Cole Ragans being the ace of this team, that's the blessing they have for so many years. And I don't want to say so many because, after James Shields, I'm not sure there was that defined ace from start to finish. It's, guys like Edinson Volquez, loved what Volquez did for the Royals, and especially what he did in 2015. Yordano Ventura had the nickname Ace. However, he did have an ace-type season, you could say, in 2014. And then you remember he had his ups and downs in 15, certainly had his ups and downs in 2016. James Shields, to me, was the last true ace of the Royals, where game 1, you're not even second-guessing this. You are the opening day starter, and you are going to be the game 1 starter. If we have a game 7 scenario, a game 5 elimination game scenario, you are going to be getting the ball. Cole Ragans became that. And Cole Ragans was one of the top pitchers in all of baseball last year. I don't throw out the term ace lightly. You don't just get the title of an ace if you are the number 1 pitcher on a bad team. Brad Keller was the opening day starter and a number 1 for Kansas City a couple of years in a row. Danny Duffy was that as well. And yes, Danny Duffy had the phenomenal 2016, looked like an ace, pitched like an ace. And maybe just 1 year of Cole Ragans, you need to have a little bit more than that to be called an ace of a rotation. However, my opinion changes of you if you start game 1 of a playoff series and you dominate, which he did against Baltimore. And what's great about this Royals rotation is that if you put Seth Lugo in a lot of places out there in baseball, he's the ace of that staff. I would even say that Michael Wacha could be considered the ace of a couple of staffs out there. Doesn't really have the ace stuff, and Seth Lugo last year did. Inning workload, the number of pitches that he threw, could get a lot of swing and miss. Not so much a strikeout total, of course, that Cole Ragans had. And that's another part to this as well. Aces are always able to rack up strikeouts. It's a very basic stat, but you go over the Cy Young winners, handful of years. Most all of them have that power stuff. Cole Ragans is the only guy in that Royals rotation that has the lights out power stuff. And to get this nod on opening day, it's great to see. Because Cole Ragans was a guy that for years in Texas couldn't be pictured as this type of arm. Certainly when they drafted him in the first round, you thought he can be a frontline guy in the future. And maybe there were points in time at the minor league level where he was seen as maybe that big time prospect. You play your cards right, you develop him properly, he can be a number one on this staff. It just didn't happen. Too many injuries, not enough consistency. The Royals saw special talent in there. They brought him over to Kansas City. He's been fantastic ever since. If you are a Royals fan, you want the boring pick every single year. That's what I love about this second straight opening day start for Cole Ragans. You didn't have to go into the offseason thinking, who could it be? Who is going to be that opening day starter? It's going to be Cole Ragans as long as he's here in Kansas City and as long as he stays healthy, in my opinion. And I'm rolling the dice with the numbers. I believe that as long as he's healthy, he is always going to be the best pitcher for Kansas City in that rotation. So that's the news of yesterday per Annie Rogers. Cole Ragans named the opening day starter next Thursday against the Cleveland Guardians at Kauffman Stadium. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we talked a little bit about Jac Caglianone. How about we show some love to another prospect who had a great spring and very well might make his debut in 2025? Gavin Cross. We'll talk about him next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
The final segment we're going to be diving into here involves a prospect that at one point in time was considered one of the top prospects in the Royals system. And this is how things usually work. When you are a first-round pick, you automatically get thrown into the top 10, top 5 of that system. And Gavin Cross, when he was selected out of the draft a couple years back, it was the 2022 draft, if I'm not mistaken, he felt like the safe pick. There was nothing wrong about the pick. There was nothing that stood out about the pick. In fact, last year, when Jac Caglianone fell to the Royals, that felt like more of the risky pick. He was great at Florida. There just might have been more safe bets. Like Hagen Smith out of Arkansas was mocked to Kansas City a few times. He ended up going to Chicago. That, if he was there, would have been a good pick. Not anything that blew you away. Jac Caglianone, to me, felt like that pick that blew you away. Man, I can't believe he fell there. That is a big-time prospect. Almost felt like the boom or bust. If it doesn't work out, you could have gone with the safer pick. The Royals were going for tremendous upside. And so far, very early on in his career, it looks like that pick has paid off for them. Some teams just have that ideology, though. I want to go the safe route. If this guy only ends up being an average starter for us for 2 years, I can live with it because at least they made it to the big leagues. And Gavin Cross felt like that type of pick. I'm fine with it. I'm not sure there was anybody else that truly stuck out where you felt gutted that the Royals didn't take him. I'll be honest. And we did the podcast at the time right after the Royals had taken Blake Mitchell. I wanted Kyle Teal. And Kyle Teal being a college bat felt like more of a safe pick. The Royals did go with more of the boom or bust potential. And there was that stigma on high school catchers. The success rate hadn't been very good since Joe Mauer was taken. Or I should say high school catchers taken in the top 10 for the MLB draft. So with Gavin Cross, he has not lived up yet to that first round potential. And maybe throughout 2023, you could have written him off. It feels like another Royals top 10 pick that just flames out a little bit too early, never turns into the big time prospect. And you were left wondering, what do they have to do, other than Bobby Witt Jr., to get that guy that Major League Baseball is talking about as a great player? He is going to be an above average hitter, above average defender, just a great player for a small market team. And with Gavin Cross, you saw him play well when he first got sent to Columbia right out of the draft. His OBP was north of 420. But then in 2023, dealt with that freak illness. I forgot what they called it, actually. It had the term mountain in it as well. It was like a tick bite, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I don't know all the details on it. That's irrelevant for this. He was not well, not 100%, of course, and it affected his play. He was not the same guy in 2023. Hit 203 between AA and AAA, and then going into 2024, got healthier, was great in spring training. I remember when we were down in Surprise leading into the 2024 season, he was talked about as one of those guys that, wow, he's popping in camp. He looks healthy. He looks good. The swing's good. And that translated into 2024. He did deal with an injury in the second half of the season, still hit 261, had a 342 OBP, a 770 OPS on the season, had, I believe, 15 home runs and drove in nearly 60 and stole 30 bases. That is a prospect that you can keep your eye on. And he's still really young. He just turned 24, and he has the first-round talent. And good for him that he is an outfielder. And we know the state of the Royals team right now and how the corner outfield spots could be up for grabs. Jac Caglianone, don't get me wrong, he is the best prospect in the system. And we all want to see him in Kansas City this year and playing one of the corner outfield spots. I saw this out there this morning, I want to say it was. There could, I believe it was just one of the commenters on YouTube or might have been on X. Gavin Cross could be up in Kansas City earlier than Jac Caglianone. Gavin Cross has been in the system for a few years. He knows the outfield positions. If there was a scenario where somebody goes down to an injury early on in April, Gavin Cross might be one of those first calls. He played so well in spring training, really looked good, swing looked good. He had the Arizona Fall League last year. I'm not sure the power is ever going to be big league material. However, considering what we saw from the corner outfield spots last year, this is something where, maybe he could be that answer. I'm not there just yet to say that Gavin Cross is an everyday starter, and it will take some time. Again, I got asked this on Mailbag Friday, and I want to readdress it here. Gavin Cross needs to prove that he can stay healthy for an extended period of time. The Royals can't count on him to be an everyday starter, even with the numbers looking good in April, if you have to be concerned of, we've seen in his minor league career, stuff has prevented him from staying on the field. One of them, I'm not good. The illness, I'm not going to count that. That's unfair to do. That is a freak thing that happened. There is nothing you could do, in my opinion, to prevent something like that happening. It's just bad luck. Last year, you did have a great season that might have been derailed a little bit by an injury. But I go into this year expecting him to make the debut. When that debut will be, that's a question for a different episode. If all goes well in April and May and somebody's struggling at the corner outfield spot, maybe that is when you make that move. If Hunter Renfroe, who did have a great day yesterday, I want to say he was 3 for 3 with 2 doubles. He's had more so a quiet spring, but did look good. And this is about the time in spring training you want guys to look all but ready. Let's say, though, Hunter Renfroe, like he did last year, goes down for a month. Do you call on Gavin Cross if he's hitting 330? I would. I would like to see if Gavin Cross can be an everyday contributor. Or if MJ Melendez is struggling. It makes it a little bit more complicated because I would like to see the Royals platoon Melendez a little bit and Gavin Cross as a lefty. I don't know, though. If he can handle all three outfield spots and he stays healthy and he takes this confidence from spring training into the beginning of the minor league season, I don't know why you'd keep him down. The outfield depth isn't phenomenal in AAA. You'll see Drew Waters down there, Nelson Velasquez, Nick Prado, Joey Wiemer. Joey Wiemer might get that first crack because he's a righty. He can play all three spots. He defends well. However, Gavin Cross might have the higher ceiling offensively at the plate. It all comes down to what the Royals may be needing at that point in time. But they got two prospects I'm ready to see soon in the big leagues. That's Jac Caglianone and Gavin Cross. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball Podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Podcasts on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about opening day being less than 10 days away, and I might have a new pick, a new choice for my opening day roster projection. If no other news breaks, that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.